The UES Liberty drifted through the black void of space, her engines humming quietly as Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge watching the stars. 3 years into humanity's first deep space exploration mission, they had found nothing but empty systems and dead rocks. Jake rubbed his tired eyes and wondered if Earth had sent them on a fool's errand. "Captain, we're getting something strange on long-range sensors," called out Lieutenant Commander Lisa Bennett from her communication station. Her voice carried that edge it got when something big was happening. Jake walked over to look at her screen, watching as green dots appeared on the display. "What am I looking at, Lisa?" "It's huge, sir. Bigger than anything we've ever built. The computer says it's artificial, definitely not natural." Lisa's fingers danced across her controls, trying to get a clearer picture. "Distance is about 2 million kilometers off our starboard bow." Jake felt his heart speed up. After 3 years of finding nothing, they had finally discovered proof that humanity was not alone in the universe. He turned to his science officer, a thin man with graying hair who always looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Dr. Kevin Walsh, what do you make of this?" Kevin was already bent over his instruments, his face lit up by the glow of multiple screens. "Captain, this thing is massive. I'm reading a structure that's at least 50 kilometers long and maybe 20 wide. The materials are nothing like anything in our databases. This is definitely alien technology." Security Chief Commander Amy Rodriguez stepped forward, her hand already resting on her sidearm out of habit. "Sir, recommend we go to yellow alert. We don't know what we're dealing with here." Jake nodded and gave the order. Throughout the ship, crew members stopped what they were doing as the alert klaxon sounded. Battle stations were manned even though nobody knew what they might be fighting. Jake had learned early in his military career that it was better to be ready for trouble than caught unprepared. "Take us closer, but keep our distance. I want to get a good look at this thing before we do anything else," Jake ordered the helmsman. As the Liberty approached, the alien structure became clearer on their screens. It looked like a giant metal flower floating in space, with petals that seemed to shimmer and change color. Strange lights pulsed along its surface in patterns that hurt to look at for too long. Jake had seen a lot of things in his 20 years in space, but nothing had prepared him for this. "Captain, I'm picking up some kind of transmission," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not radio, not anything we recognize. The computer is trying to decode it, but it's going to take time." "How long?" "Maybe an hour, maybe more. This is completely different from anything human." Jake was about to respond when every screen on the bridge suddenly went white. A sound filled the air that was like music and static at the same time. When the screens cleared, they were looking at something that might have been a face if faces could be made of crystal and light. "Greetings, young species," the thing said in perfect English, though its mouth didn't move the way human mouths did. "I am Ambassador Veltar of the Galactic Council. We have been watching your primitive vessels explore this region of space." Jake stepped forward, trying to look more confident than he felt. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth ship Liberty. We come in peace." The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. "Of course you do. All new species say that when they first encounter us. I represent a coalition of 13 advanced civilizations that have maintained peace and order in this galaxy for over 10,000 of your years." Dr. Walsh moved closer to Jake and whispered, "Sir, if they've been watching us, they know about Earth. They know where we come from." Veltar continued as if he hadn't heard them. "Your species has reached the level of development where integration into our society becomes necessary. This is a moment of great honor for your people. Very few species achieve space travel without destroying themselves first." "Integration?" Jake asked, not liking the sound of that word. "Yes. All species that join the Galactic Council must undergo a standard process to ensure peace and stability. It has worked successfully for thousands of years." The alien's image flickered slightly, as if the transmission was having trouble staying clear. I am transmitting the standard integration package to your vessel now. Your leaders will have 72 of your hours to review and accept the terms. Lisa's station started beeping rapidly as data flowed in. Captain, they're sending us a massive file. The computer says it will take several minutes to download completely. Jake watched the progress bar creep slowly across Lisa's screen while the alien waited patiently. When it finished, Veltar spoke again. The terms are quite reasonable. Your species will undergo a probationary period of 200 years, during which all military vessels must be surrendered to Council forces for peaceful conversion. 80% of your population will be relocated to agricultural worlds where they can contribute to galactic food production. Your remaining population will be educated in Council ways and integrated into our society. Amy Rodriguez stepped forward, anger clear on her face. You're talking about breaking up our entire civilization. I am talking about bringing your species into a peaceful galactic community, Veltar replied calmly. All technological development will be overseen by Council scientists to prevent the creation of weapons or other dangerous devices. Your world's resources will be managed by Council administrators to ensure optimal use. This is how peace is maintained. Jake felt sick to his stomach. Everything the alien was describing sounded like slavery dressed up in pretty words. And if we refuse? Veltar's crystalline features shifted into what might have been surprise. Refuse? Young Captain, no species has ever refused Council integration. It would be illogical. We offer peace, prosperity, and protection. Why would any intelligent species choose the chaos of independence? Because some things are more important than safety, Jake said quietly. The alien was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, becoming colder and more formal. I suggest you study the integration package carefully, Captain Morrison. The Council has never encountered a species foolish enough to reject our offer of civilization. I trust your leaders are wiser than you appear to be. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in silence. Jake looked around at his crew, seeing his own thoughts reflected in their faces. They had found intelligent life in the universe, and it wanted to put humanity in chains. Lisa, prepare a full data burst to Earth. Include everything we've recorded, here, along with my personal recommendation. Jake straightened his shoulders and looked out at the alien structure that seemed to be watching them. Kevin, I want a full analysis of that thing's capabilities. Amy, prepare the crew for the possibility that we might not be going home peacefully. As the Liberty began transmitting humanity's first message about alien contact back to Earth, Jake wondered if they had just signed their species' death warrant. The aliens seemed to expect submission without question, but they obviously didn't know much about human nature. Somewhere back on Earth, President Helen Carter and the United Earth Defense Committee would soon be making the most important decision in human history. Jake just hoped they would make the right choice, even if it meant war with forces beyond their understanding. The stars looked different now, no longer empty and peaceful, but filled with watching eyes and hidden threats. Humanity's age of innocence was over. The emergency session began at dawn in the underground bunker beneath Geneva. President Helen Carter sat at the head of the table, her face pale as she watched the recorded transmission from the Liberty for the third time. Around her, the United Eye. Earth Defense Committee studied their tablets, reading through the alien integration package that had arrived just 6 hours ago. This is slavery, said General Carl Wright, his weathered hands gripping the table edge. They want to scatter our people across the galaxy like farm animals and strip away everything that makes us human. Dr. Patricia Lee looked up from her analysis, pushing her glasses up her nose. As Earth's leading xenobiologist, she had spent years theorizing about first contact scenarios, but nothing had prepared her for this reality. It's worse than slavery, General. Look at Section 12 of their document. They plan to control human reproduction, deciding who can have children and where those children will be raised. Director of Intelligence Maria Santos spread several photographs across the table. My people have been going through their cultural database. Every species they've integrated has been reduced to a single function. The Kalari became miners. The Thendari became food producers. The Vox became manual laborers. They don't integrate civilizations. They absorb them and erase everything unique about them. Helen Carter rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of 7 billion lives pressing down on her shoulders. Dr. Lee, in your professional opinion, what happens to species that refuse integration? Patricia hesitated before answering. Based on their historical records, no species has ever refused. But the few references I can find to rebellious worlds suggest complete orbital bombardment. They don't leave survivors to spread ideas about resistance. The room fell silent, except for the quiet hum of the air recycling system. Helen looked around the table at the faces of humanity's military and scientific leaders. These were people who had dedicated their lives to protecting and advancing human civilization, and now they were being asked to choose between surrender and extinction. Admiral Frank Collins, what's the status of our defense forces? The old admiral straightened in his chair, his steel-gray eyes meeting the president's gaze. Madam President, we have 847 combat vessels of various classes, currently operational. Our newest ships carry fusion torpedoes and railgun batteries. We've been preparing for hostile first contact scenarios since the Mars colonies were established. Can we fight them? Frank was quiet for a long moment, considering his words carefully. Their technology is clearly superior in some areas. They're faster than light communication, and that massive station show capabilities we can't match yet. But from what Captain Morrison observed, their ship designs don't look like they were built for combat. They've been at peace for 10,000 years, which means they've probably forgotten how to fight a real war. Maria leaned forward, her intelligence officer instincts taking over. There's something else. Their ambassador seemed genuinely shocked when Jake suggested we might refuse. These people have never encountered resistance before. They don't know how to handle it. Dr. Lee nodded, pulling up more data on her tablet. The psychological profiles I've built suggest they view themselves as benevolent caretakers. In their minds, they're doing us a favor by integrating us into their society. The concept that we might prefer independence doesn't compute for them. That could work in our favor, General Wright said. An enemy who doesn't understand your motivations can't predict your actions, but it also makes them more dangerous because they might escalate beyond what they originally planned. Helen stood up and walked to the large screen showing Earth from orbit. Cities twinkled like stars across the day and night sides of the planet, representing billions of people going about their daily lives with no idea their entire future was being decided in this room. Admiral Collins, how long would it take to mobilize our full military capacity? If we activate all reserves and bring the colonial defense fleets back to Earth, we could have 1,200 ships ready for combat within 2 weeks. That includes pulling vessels from asteroid mining operations and the outer system patrols. Do it. Issue the mobilization order immediately, but keep it classified. I don't want panic in the streets until we know what we're dealing with. Helen turned back to face the committee. Dr. Lee, I want you to prepare a detailed analysis of everything we know about Council society and technology. Find weaknesses we can exploit. Maria, coordinate with our deep space monitoring stations. I want to know the moment any alien ships enter our solar system. She paused, looking each person in the eye before continuing. General Wright, begin preparing civilian evacuation plans for major population centers. If this goes badly, I want our people to have somewhere to run. The meeting continued for another 4 hours as they planned humanity's response to the greatest threat in its history. When it finally ended, Helen remained behind with Admiral Collins. Frank, tell me honestly, what are our chances if this becomes a shooting war? The Admiral sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. Madam President, if they come at us with the kind of numbers they're probably capable of, we'll hurt them badly, but they'll eventually overwhelm us through sheer mass. Our only real advantage is that we've spent our entire history fighting each other. We know war in a way they've forgotten. And if we surrender, then humanity as we know it ceases to exist. Our children will grow up as slaves, never knowing freedom or the right to choose their own destiny. Helen nodded slowly. She had already made her decision, but hearing it confirmed by her military commander strengthened her resolve. Prepare Captain Morrison's ship to return to the alien station. I want to send our response personally. 3 days later, the Liberty approached the Council monitoring station again. This time, Ambassador Veltar appeared on their screens almost immediately, his crystalline features showing what might have been eagerness. Captain Morrison, I trust your leaders have reviewed our generous offer and are prepared to begin the integration process. Jake stood straighter, his voice carrying the authority of speaking for all humanity. Ambassador Veltar, I have been authorized by President Helen Carter and the United Earth government to deliver our official response to your integration proposal. Excellent. The Council will be pleased to welcome another species into civilized society. Jake looked directly at the alien ambassador, his voice steady and clear. Humanity appreciates the Council's offer, but must respectfully decline. We choose to remain independent and will defend that independence with whatever force necessary. For several seconds, Veltar simply stared at the screen as if he hadn't heard correctly. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a note of confusion that bordered on panic. Captain, there must be some translation error. No intelligent species would choose the chaos of independence over the peace and prosperity of Council membership. Perhaps your leaders did not fully understand the benefits we offer. They understood perfectly, Jake replied. Humanity values freedom above safety, independence above comfort. We will not surrender our right to determine our own future. The alien's crystalline features began shifting rapidly, cycling through colors Jake had never seen before. This is unprecedented. This is impossible. I must contact the Council immediately. Your species does not understand the consequences of defying galactic law. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the Liberty alone in space once again. But Jake knew they wouldn't be alone for long. Somewhere across the galaxy, the Galactic Council was learning that humanity was unlike any species they had ever encountered. Back on Earth, Admiral Collins was already moving the defense fleets into position, knowing that humanity had just declared war on forces beyond their imagination. The die was cast, and there would be no going back. Fleet Commander Thane Kuldor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Harmony, watching as 50 Council vessels moved through space toward the human solar system. His 6 arms moved gracefully across the control panels, coordinating. The formation with the practiced ease of someone who had spent 3 centuries maintaining peace across the galaxy. Commander, we are approaching the outer edge of the human system, reported his navigation officer, a tall, blue-skinned Kethmari whose species had joined the Council 8,000 years ago. Long-range sensors are detecting multiple artificial objects orbiting their primary star. Thane's large compound eyes focused on the tactical display, studying the primitive human settlements scattered across several worlds. How many vessels do they have, Navigator Yulton? It is difficult to say, Commander. Their technology is crude, but we are reading at least 200 ships moving into defensive positions around their 3rd planet. Thane made a sound that translated roughly as dismissive laughter. His species, the Mordak, had been the Council's enforcers for over 5,000 years, and he had never encountered a situation that couldn't be resolved through a simple show of superior force. 200 ships against 50 of ours, he mused, his mandibles clicking together in amusement. These humans clearly do not understand the difference in our capabilities. Open a channel to their fleet commander. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of a human vessel. A middle-aged man in a blue uniform looked back at him with steady eyes that showed no fear, only determination. Thane recognized the expression from historical records of primitive species before they learned their place in the galactic order. "I am Fleet Commander Thane Kuldor of the Galactic Council Enforcement Division," he announced, his translator converting his clicks and whistles into human speech. "You will identify yourself and prepare to receive Council authority." The human straightened slightly, his voice calm and professional. "I am Admiral Frank Collins of the United Earth Defense Fleet. You are in violation of human space, Commander. Turn your ships around and leave immediately." Thane's 4 arms spread wide in a gesture of amazement. "Human space? There is no such thing as human space, Admiral Collins. All space belongs to the Council, and all civilized species accept our guidance. Your rebellion ends now." Admiral Collins seemed unmoved by the threat. "Commander, I'm going to give you one chance to withdraw peacefully. Your ambassador made his offer, we declined, and that should be the end of it. Don't make this into something bigger than it needs to be." "There is no declining Council integration," Thane replied, his voice hardening. "Every species eventually accepts the wisdom of our guidance. Some require demonstration of our capabilities first." The human admiral's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes grew colder. "Then demonstrate away, Bugman, but remember that you started this." The transmission ended before Thane could respond to the insult. Around him, his bridge crew stirred uneasily, unused to hearing anyone speak to a council commander with such disrespect. Thane's translator had clearly conveyed the meaning of Bugman, and while it was technically accurate given his insectoid appearance, no one had dared use such language in his presence for centuries. "All ships assume attack formation," he ordered, his anger making his voice sharper than usual. "We will teach these primitives the price of defying the Council." The 50 Council vessels spread out into their standard intimidation pattern, a formation designed to look overwhelming to species accustomed to thinking in terms of single ships or small squadrons. Each vessel was 3 times the size of the largest human ship, their hulls covered in the energy shields that had made them invulnerable for thousands of years. "Human vessels are moving into combat formation," reported his weapons officer. "They appear to be clustering around their home world in multiple defensive layers." Thane studied the tactical display with growing confusion. The human formation made no sense according to any military doctrine he knew. Instead of trying to meet his fleet in open space, where they might have some chance of maneuver, they were hugging close to their planet like frightened children, hiding behind their mother's skirts. Do they think their planet's gravity will protect them? He wondered aloud. "Begin jamming their communications and prepare to fire warning shots across their formation. Once they see our weapons in action, they will surrender like all the others." The Council fleet powered up their energy weapons, sending brilliant beams of coherent light toward the human formation. The shots were deliberately aimed to miss, designed to demonstrate power without causing casualties. Thane had used this tactic hundreds of times with rebellious worlds, and it had never failed to produce immediate surrender. This time was different. The human response came so quickly that Thane's tactical officer barely had time to shout a warning before the first railgun projectile punched through the shields of his lead destroyer. The solid tungsten slug, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, tore through the ship's hull like it was made of paper, venting atmosphere and debris into space before the crew even realized they were under attack. "Impossible," Thane whispered, watching as more projectiles streaked toward his formation. Council shields were supposed to stop any kinetic weapon, but these human slugs were moving faster than anything in their databases. "All ships, evasive maneuvers. Return, fire with full power." But the Council ships had been built for patrol duty and policing actions against primitives with basic weapons. They were large, impressive, and heavily shielded, but they moved like floating cities compared to the smaller, faster human vessels that darted between them like angry wasps. Captain Lisa Blake of the UES Defiance led her squadron in a perfect flanking attack, her ship's fusion torpedoes finding gaps in the Council formation that Thane hadn't even known existed. When her weapons officer fired, the nuclear warhead detonated against the side of a council cruiser, overwhelming its shields and cracking its hull like an egg. Shields failing on multiple vessels, his damage control officer reported. Panic creeping into his voice. These humans are using nuclear weapons as standard armament. Our defensive systems were never designed to handle such primitive brutality. Thane watched in growing horror as his formation disintegrated under the human assault. Ships that had maintained galactic peace for millennia were being torn apart by weapons that any civilized species would consider barbarically crude. The humans were using their own vessels as weapons, ramming damaged council ships when they ran out of ammunition. "Commander, we're receiving casualty reports from across the fleet," his communications officer announced. 17 ships destroyed, 23 more heavily damaged. The humans are not taking prisoners. The battle lasted only 17 minutes, but it shattered everything Thane thought he knew about warfare. His magnificent fleet, the pride of Council military might, was being systematically destroyed by a species that shouldn't have been able to scratch their paint. "All ships, emergency jump to hyperspace," he ordered, his voice breaking with defeat. "Full retreat, maximum speed." As the surviving council vessels fled through dimensional tiers back toward their home space, Thane tried to process what had just happened. The humans had fought like demons, showing no mercy and asking for none. They used tactics that no civilized species would consider, turning the very laws of physics into weapons of mass destruction. Dr. Elena Martinez monitored the retreating alien ships from her station on Earth, recording their panicked communications as they fled. The intercepted transmissions painted a picture of absolute terror as the survivors tried to explain to their superiors how a primitive species had just destroyed the most powerful fleet in known galactic history. Admiral Collins stood on his flagship's bridge, looking out at the debris field that had once been the Council's demonstration fleet. Around him, his officers worked to coordinate search and rescue efforts for human vessels damaged in the fighting, but there was an undercurrent of grim satisfaction in their voices. "Sir, preliminary casualty report." His aide handed him a tablet. 12 human ships destroyed, 37 damaged. Enemy casualties estimated at over 15,000. Collins nodded grimly. The price had been higher than he'd hoped, but much lower than he'd feared. More importantly, they had sent a message that would be heard across the galaxy. "Send a transmission to all frequencies," he ordered. Message as follows: "Human space is now closed to Council vessels. Any ship entering this system without permission will be destroyed without warning. We sought peace, but we are prepared for war." As the message broadcast across space, Collins wondered how long it would take for the Council to respond. He doubted they would give up after one defeat, no matter how decisive. The next time they came, they would come in force, and humanity would need every advantage they could get. But for now, they had won their first victory against an enemy that had never known defeat, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Great Chamber on Nexus Prime had never seen such chaos in its 10,000-year history. Representatives from 13 species filled the circular hall, their voices creating a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and harmonics as they all tried to speak at once. At the center of it all, Supreme Chancellor Krixtal stood with his crystalline body pulsing angry red colors that hurt to look at directly. "Silence," he commanded, his voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics until it overwhelmed all other sounds. "We will have order in this assembly." The ethereal Kethamari representative, a being of pure energy contained within a shimmering field, spoke first in tones like wind chimes. "Chancellor, we must reconsider our approach to these humans. Perhaps we offered too little in our initial integration package." "They destroyed 17 of our ships," interrupted the Vorthan delegate, her crystalline form resonating with distress frequencies. "No species has ever dared attack Council forces. This aggression cannot be tolerated." Supreme Chancellor Krixtal's form shifted through several color spectrums before settling on a deep purple that indicated deep thought mixed with rage. His species had led the Council for over 3,000 years, and never in that time had their authority been challenged so directly. "The humans have made their choice," he announced, his voice carrying across the chamber. "They prefer violence to civilization, chaos to order. Very well, they shall have all the violence they can handle." The Depth Dweller ambassador, speaking through a tank of specialized water, bubbled his concerns. "Chancellor, perhaps we should simply avoid their system entirely. They are only one small species on the edge of civilized space. One small species that has shown other primitives that the Council can be defeated," Krixtal snapped back. "How long before every world under our protection begins to think they can follow the human example? How long before our entire civilization collapses into the same chaos that consumed the galaxy before we brought peace?" The chamber fell silent as the representatives considered his words. For 10 millennia, the Council had maintained order through the simple principle that resistance was impossible. Every species that had ever been discovered eventually accepted integration because the alternative was extinction. The humans had shattered that illusion in 17 minutes of brutal combat. Dr. Yilhan of the scientific cast stepped forward, his forearms gesturing to the holographic displays surrounding the chamber. "My analysis of the battle records shows disturbing patterns in human behavior. They do not fight like any civilized species. They use their own ships as weapons. They employ nuclear devices as standard armament, and their tactical formations suggest they expect casualties as a normal part of combat." "What does that mean in practical terms?" asked the Mordak military representative, still shaken by the loss of so many ships under his command. "It means they are a warrior species in the truest sense," Dr. Yilhan replied. "While we have spent 10,000 years perfecting peace, they have spent the same time perfecting war. Our ships are designed to intimidate and overwhelm primitives. Theirs are designed to kill other warships." Chancellor Krixtal began pacing around the central platform, his crystalline feet clicking against the floor in a rhythm that spoke of barely controlled fury. "Then we will show them what happens when primitives challenge advanced civilization. I am authorizing the mobilization of the Grand Fleet." A gasp went through the assembly. The Grand Fleet had not been deployed in over 2,000 years, not since the last Great Rebellion had been crushed on the Outer Rim. It represented every military vessel in Council space. Over 2,000 ships carrying the combined might of 13 civilizations. "Chancellor, surely such extreme measures are not necessary," pleaded the Kethmari representative. "These humans number only a few billion individuals on a handful of worlds. The Grand Fleet is designed to pacify entire galactic sectors. The Grand Fleet is designed to ensure that the Council's authority is never questioned again," Krixtal replied coldly. "When we finish with the humans, their worlds will serve as an example to any other species that might consider following their path." On Earth, President Helen Carter stood in the Situation Room deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, watching as intelligence reports flowed in from across the galaxy. The screens showed massive troop movements, ships gathering at staging, points and weapons being loaded onto vessels that dwarfed anything in the human fleet. "How many ships are we looking at?" she asked Director Maria Santos. "Conservative estimate is 1,500 combat vessels, possibly as many as 2,000, Maria replied, her face grim. "They're pulling ships from patrol duties across their entire territory. This isn't just about us anymore, Madam President. They're mobilizing for total war." General Carl Wright studied the tactical displays with the eye of someone who had spent 40 years preparing for the worst-case scenarios. "They're not taking any chances this time. Whatever advantages we had in the first battle, they're going to try to overwhelm them with sheer numbers." "Dr. Nathan Parker, what's the status on our weapons production?" Helen asked the head of the Advanced Weapons Division. Nathan looked up from his tablet, exhaustion clear in his eyes after weeks of around-the-clock work. "We've got every factory on Earth and the colonies working triple shifts. Antimatter warhead production is up 300%, and engineer Sophie Turner's shipyards are launching new vessels every day. But, Madam President, we're still looking at being outnumbered at least 2-1, possibly 3-1. Helen nodded grimly. The mathematics of the situation were clear, but surrender was still not an option. Admiral Collins, can we win this? Frank Collins was quiet for a long moment, studying the intelligence reports with the careful attention of a professional soldier facing impossible odds. Madam President, in a straight fight in open space, they'll eventually wear us down through attrition. But if we can draw them into fighting on our terms, in our space, using tactics they don't understand, we might have a chance. What kind of tactics? The kind that civilized species don't use because they're too brutal to contemplate, Frank replied. We'll have to fight dirty, use every advantage we can find, and be willing to sacrifice everything to win. The moment we start thinking like them, start worrying about collateral damage or minimizing casualties, we lose. Meanwhile, Commodore Jake Morrison led reconnaissance missions deep into Council space, his ship equipped with the newest stealth technology human engineers could devise. What he found convinced him that humanity was facing enemies who had forgotten the most basic principles of warfare. Their ship formations are ceremonial, he reported back to Admiral Collins during one coded transmission. They move in parade formations designed to look impressive, not to fight battles. Their crews are comfortable, well-fed, and completely unprepared for the kind of war we're about to bring them. Any weaknesses we can exploit? Their logistics are their biggest vulnerability, Jake replied. They've never had to fight a prolonged campaign. Their supply lines are designed to support peacekeeping operations, not sustained combat. If we can disrupt their ability to resupply and reinforce, we might be able to defeat them in detail rather than facing their entire fleet at once. Back on Nexus Prime, Chancellor Crickstall stood before the assembled Grand Fleet, his form blazing with colors that spoke of absolute confidence and righteous fury. 2,000 ships filled the space around the Council's capital world, their combined firepower capable of reducing entire planets to molten slag. Warriors of the Council, he broadcast to every ship in the fleet, we go now to face an enemy unlike any we have encountered in living memory. The humans have chosen war over peace, chaos over order. They have shown the galaxy that our authority can be challenged. This cannot stand. The assembled crews, many of whom had never seen combat beyond policing actions against smugglers and pirates, listened with growing excitement. For generations, they had heard stories of the great wars that had established Council dominance, and now they would have their chance to write new chapters in galactic history. We will teach these primitives the price of defying civilization, Crixatal continued. When we are finished, their worlds will serve as monuments to the folly of resistance. Every species in the galaxy will remember what happens to those who reject the Council's generous offer of peace. As the Grand Fleet prepared to depart for human space, Chancellor Crixtal allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Soon, the human problem would be solved permanently, and the galaxy could return to the peaceful order that had reigned for 10,000 years. He had no way of knowing that in choosing total war against humanity, he had just signed the death warrant for the civilization he sought to protect. The Grand Fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Centauri system like a metal storm cloud, blotting out the stars. 2,000 Council vessels arranged themselves in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming under the light of distant suns as Chancellor Crixtal himself stood on the bridge of his flagship, the voice of order. Behold the might of galactic civilization, he announced to his fleet commanders over the communication network. Today, we restore order to the galaxy and remind all species why the Council's word is law. Admiral Frank Collins watched the alien fleet's arrival from his command ship, the UES Retribution, surrounded by 1,200 human vessels spread across 3 defensive lines. His weathered face showed no emotion as he studied the tactical display. But inside, he felt the familiar pre-battle calm that had carried him through 40 years of military service. All ships, this is Admiral Collins, he broadcast on all frequencies. You know what we're fighting for today. Not just our lives, not just our freedom, but the right of every thinking being in this galaxy to choose their own destiny. Make every shot count. Chancellor Krixtal opened a channel to the human fleet, his crystalline features blazing with confident authority. Admiral Collins, I offer you one final chance to surrender. Order your ships to stand down, and I will ensure your people receive merciful treatment during their integration into Council society. Collins looked directly at the alien leader through the transmission, his voice steady and clear. Chancellor, let me explain something about human nature that you've never bothered to learn. We are a species that would rather die on our feet than live on our knees. We bow to no one, and we never give up. Then you have chosen extinction, Krixtal replied coldly. All ships, begin the attack. Show these primitives the price of defying civilization. The Grand Fleet surged forward. In a massive wave, their energy weapons lighting up space with brilliant beams of coherent light. But Admiral Collins had learned from the previous battle, and his ships were already moving before the aliens fired their first shots. Captain Rebecca Stone led the first human squadron in a desperate flanking maneuver, her ship the UES Freedom, diving through the Council formation like a shark through a school of fish. Her fusion torpedoes found their marks on 2 alien cruisers before the enemy could react, nuclear fire blooming against their shields. Target their command ships, Collins ordered over the tactical network. Cut off their coordination, and they'll start making mistakes. Commander Tony Williams took his destroyer squadron on a suicide run straight at the Council flagship, his ships weaving between the massive alien vessels while pouring railgun fire into their hulls. When his ammunition ran low, he rammed his damaged ship directly into a Council battlecruiser, the explosion tearing both vessels apart in a ball of superheated plasma. The battle raged across the entire system as human ships fought with the desperate fury of a species facing extinction. They used tactics that no civilized race would consider, turning asteroids into kinetic weapons and detonating nuclear mines in the middle of enemy formations. Chancellor Krixtal watched in growing horror as his magnificent fleet began to take casualties. How are they doing this? We outnumber them nearly 2-1. His tactical officer, a nervous Kethmari who had never seen real combat before, studied his instruments with shaking hands. Chancellor, their ships are smaller and faster than ours. They're using the system's gravity wells to slingshot around planets and attack from unexpected angles. Our formation is too rigid to respond effectively. Then break formation, Krixtal snapped. All ships, free engagement. Hunt them down individually. But that order played directly into human hands. Admiral Collins had spent months studying Council tactics, and he knew their greatest weakness was their reliance on overwhelming force and coordinated attacks. When they broke formation, they became individual targets for human wolf packs. Captain Lisa Bennett, now commanding her own ship after her promotion, led a squadron of fast attack craft against isolated Council vessels. Her tactics were brutal, but effective, crippling enemy ships and leaving them floating dead in space rather than wasting ammunition to finish them off. Admiral, we're getting casualty reports from across the fleet, his communications officer reported. Enemy losses are mounting, but we're taking heavy damage too. We can't keep this pace up much longer. Collins nodded grimly. He had known from the beginning that this would be a battle of attrition, and humanity simply didn't have the numbers to win a prolonged fight. Signal all ships. Begin final assault pattern. It's time to end this. The remaining human vessels converged on the Council flagship in a coordinated attack that sacrificed everything for a single decisive blow. Ships that were already damaged beyond repair used their last moments to ram enemy vessels or detonate their reactors in the middle of alien formations. Chancellor Krixtal felt his ship shudder under the impact of human weapons, alarms blaring. Throughout the bridge as his crew fought to maintain basic systems. Around him, his grand fleet was dissolving into chaos as human ships tore through their ranks like wolves among sheep. "Sir, we're receiving surrender requests from multiple vessels," his communications officer announced in disbelief. "They're abandoning the battle." "Impossible," Krixtal whispered, but the evidence was right there on his tactical display. Ships that had maintained galactic peace for millennia were turning away from battle, their crews unable to comprehend the level of violence they were witnessing. Admiral Collins saw the moment when the alien fleet's morale finally broke. Council ships began retreating individually, then in groups, until entire sections of their formation were fleeing toward the edge of the system. "All ships pursue and destroy," he ordered. "Don't let them regroup." But there was no regrouping. The Grand Fleet, pride of galactic civilization, was in full retreat. Less than 400 Council ships escaped the Centauri system, many of them badly damaged, and all of them carrying crews traumatized by their first real taste of warfare. Chancellor. Krixtal's flagship was among the casualties, its hull cracked open like an egg by human railgun fire. As his life support failed and the bridge filled with toxic smoke, his last thoughts were of disbelief that his perfect civilization could be brought low by a species of primitive barbarians. The aftermath of the battle was visible across the galaxy as news of the Council's defeat spread through hyperspace communication networks. On dozens of worlds, species that had lived under alien rule for millennia suddenly began to question why they had ever accepted integration in the first place. Admiral Morrison, now promoted to Fleet Command, established the first human embassy on Kepler Prime, a world that had declared independence from the Council within hours of learning about the human victory. He stood in the embassy's main hall, watching as representatives from 17 different species lined up to request human protection from Council retaliation. "Admiral, we're receiving reports from across the galaxy," his aide informed him. "The Council's authority is collapsing. Over 200 worlds have declared independence in the past week, and more are joining them every day." Morrison nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Humanity had not set out to become galactic liberators, but their refusal to submit had shown the entire galaxy that freedom was possible for those brave enough to fight for it. On Earth, President Helen Carter addressed the planet in a speech that would be remembered for generations. "We sought only to be left alone, to chart our own course among the stars. But in defending our freedom, we discovered that freedom is not something that can be hoarded. It must be shared with all who desire it." The Galactic Council would never recover from their defeat at Centauri. Their perfect order, built on the assumption that all intelligent species would eventually choose security over liberty, had been shattered by a race that valued independence above life itself. Humanity had proven that even the mightiest empire could fall if it faced enemies who refused to surrender, refused to compromise, and refused to accept that some things were more important than survival itself. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly how humans liked it.